Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's a very windy day today. I'm hoping my buffer, my little toy buffer, will be sufficient to filter most of the noise, but bear with me. I wanted to go for a walk instead of sit in my box. Over the past few days, I've been exploring some insights related to this toy I call the Dandelion, which is something that was demonstrated to me. Well, something the nature of which was demonstrated to me, not the toy. As if the dandelion was a being, showing me about its natures the same way I might show it about mine. And so I want to talk more about some of the entailments. It's not clear to me. Well, I have some experience of this. So we have this idea of a soul, and we think of it as a possession, right? I have a soul. This is wildly unlikely, because what is it? What is the possessor, right? Is it, my personal identity is the possessor? My body is the possessor? No. No. So something much stranger is going on, as is almost always the case if we're talking about things humans speak of commonly. So one way to think about a soul in terms of the dandelion is that I just want to make a little bookmark here. So you as a being and the place you are and your entire history and your future, but even just simply you as a body, that is a direction in the sort of hypergraph of the dandelion, right? You are a location that is more than merely alive. Most of what you are is not alive. In other words, it's not your physical body, which is in terms of this toy, it is a outcome of moment to moment oogenesis, right? You're being generated moment to moment by the dandelion as a physical being that has provisional continuity in time and matter, right? The bubble you are must still be bubbling for you to be listening to me. But you're being generated instantaneously. You're a feature in the thing you're familiar with about yourself is a feature in the physical and some of the near registers. It's very complicated. You're a feature in all registers of the dandelion except the core. There you lose your featureness and acquire something we have no word for in terms of qualities and characteristics and such. It'd be very difficult to make a word for what you are at the core. In the singularity, you are like... Yeah, I'm not even going to try that. So you are a destination into which is flowing moment to moment a generative array of processes that are amechanical. Mechanism is missing most of the dimensionality of what's going on, and is very dangerous. It fucks up the structure of time-space, the dandelion, all kinds of things. And you could say, well, why is that true? Objects don't fuck up the structure. There are objects, stones and mountains and things. Yeah, there are. But none of them that I'm aware of force electrons to recapitulate frozen iterative patterns inside dead devices, right? And it turns out that what you do with electrons matters, just like what you do to beings matters. It changes the character of the history and the future of this layer, and it affects the capacity for health, regeneration, genesis of the other registers of the dandelion. So every organism that you see is a direction in the dandelion. It could be understood as a destination from the core outward, and a point of origin from the membrane inward, though these are interchangeable depending on what you're trying to see. So the dandelion is pulsing. It's not actually pulsing, but this is, the way that I illustrate a property of this toy that is very difficult to illustrate to humans. And the frequency, it doesn't have to be increasing over time, but my understanding of it is that it does. So you're being progenerated moment to moment, and what your soul is is a very amazing thing. Let me make a very simple toy of it first. And again, these are just toys, right? What the soul is transcendental to anything you can say in language. Let's be clear about that. We're just trying to play Theoria games the way the ancient Greeks used to. Yeah. So let's take a very simple model. Imagine that we're going to demarcate the structure at 3 generations, but there's no such demarcation. Just doing this for convenience. Imagine that the previous 3 generations of your ancestors were themselves souls, and connect to that family the animals, living places, and people that were most crucially relational with those 3 generations of ancestors, so that have like a constellation in time that precedes you. And you imagine that all those beings are gone. They're not. There's a space where all of time, all of the future too. And by the way, the fact that the future is present does not make it deterministic. Because what the future is in this model is not simply the state of some physical situation at some point in time after now. It's very complex what the future means. But in the dandelion, it's all present. And so, meaning it's instantaneously now. We are in a strange position in relation to that at the physical layer, which gives us the impression of sequential time. So imagine that your soul is a constellation of the beings and relationships previous to and after you. And you can keep it very simple. You can say, well, it's just my ancestors and my progeny. That's it. That's all it is. Right? If you want to make it that simple, it's not that simple at all. But just to wrap your mind around it or make some kind of visual picture, you can use that toy. And I mean, it gets weirder. So you don't possess your soul. Your soul is more how you are than your body is. It's the isness of your being, local to now. And the crucial elements don't disappear at death, and they are not suddenly created at birth. In fact, they're being progenerated right now by the dandelion. So that's why you are a direction in the dandelion, a direction into the physical, relational, spiritual, and transcendental natures of the register in which our bodies exist. And most of the time, you're not here. That thing you're afraid of, death, you not being here, that's true most of the time. Your being here, your body, everything you see from, in this toy, is it's not an illusion precisely, but it's what you would call a side effect of the resonant frequency of collapse and expansion of the dandelion. Just like, nothing in films actually moves. Right? There's no movement in film. What you have in film are snapshots, right? You're slicing time. And then you take those slices of time as flat images and you stitch them together and then flip through them in a sequence. And you get the illusion of motion, right? But there's no motion. Motion cannot be found anywhere in the film. And even if you're not using film, you have a frames per second rate of digital captures, none of which contain motion. From the perspective of the film, there's no such thing as motion, right? And it's similar with your existence. You are disappearing and reappearing so fast, many trillions of times per trillionth of a second, in my view, that it just seems like you're continuous. But actually, probably 90% of the time, you're in unity. And from that unity is where you get feelings. The qualia are your relationship to that unity. Your deepest motivations are your relationship to that unity. Your character is drawn from the registers, and a lot of it can be drawn from this one. Okay, it's so windy here. I have to take another path. Concerned that the noise will overcome my speaking. I think what I'll do is pause. Yeah, I'll be back. So your character and identity, they're partly in the physical, right? Around here, we have methods of transferring characteristics. White sage oil, love that stuff. From generation to generation, and we think of these rather mechanically, even though biologies are amechanical. I want to make this so clear. You can view them from a mechanical perspective if you wish. It will blind you. Very compellingly blinding. Which is why you have materialists and reductivists and so forth, who think that there's nothing that exists that isn't measurable. If it isn't measurable, you can't be assured of its existence, therefore it doesn't exist. Which is nutso. Straight up nutso. So without saying what your soul is, I want to say some things about what it isn't. It isn't who you think you are. It isn't a possession. It isn't a thing. You know, if I were Stephen Wolfram, Wolfram's models bear some interesting resemblance to features of the dandelion. His idea of the Rouliard and the space of hypergraphs is very profound and dangerous. I'm glad humans aren't paying too much attention to it, because if they did, they would get a grasp on many of the things that it's crucially important that modern humans do not gain access to. So, your soul is a constellation, and the you aspect of it is similar to the sun in the solar system. It's similar to the nucleus of a cell, where the organelles live, I think. Or no, maybe the nucleus is an organelle. I might have that one backwards. Yeah, the space inside the membrane, I think, is where the organelles live. How have I forgotten this? You are a system of relations within the dandelion, primarily. Tree structures, nodes, connections, if we want to think that way. That's not how the dandelion's structured. That's a toy of its structure, if it's even structured. And in this structure, near neighbors matter. The earth matters, the sun matters. Those are central features of who you are, how you came to be here, and so forth. All of the organisms with which you interact are associated with who you are. This should be obvious. If you don't eat food, if you don't consume other organisms or their byproducts, you don't exist here for long. There are exceptions. There are people who appear to have sort of descended the registers of the dandelion so purely and truly that they can draw their life energy directly from that and do not eat food. Most people don't believe in this, but yeah, there are human beings who haven't eaten food for 10 years that are still alive. The human topology is incredibly diverse, and it is not like what you think. You're used to thinking about the most common features, and you think that features that aren't common don't exist, or are misunderstandings, or something. That's unfortunate. All topologies have, valleys and mountains. You don't see the tops of mountains, but you know that they exist, right? It's the same in the topology of humans. There are extremely unusual and exotic humans. Encountering one of them would be even stranger than encountering, a UFO or a being from another dimension. If there are beings in UFOs, they know about the dandelion, right? And they probably also know firsthand, not just theoretically, that machines fuck it up. And what they make are not machines. Though there might be exceptions. There might be sort of human similar species that produce machines or meta-machines, so forth. There is a category of machines that are amechanical. Right? It's possible to produce those. Computers are not those. Those are mechanical devices. The way that you would produce a meta-machine is to hitchhike on the structure of the dandelion from a non-physical position and make attachments to various features within the dandelion that are temporary and hopefully don't damage its natures or structures, but produce effects. the people who you think of as psychics, if they're real, right, if they're not phony psychics, and there are non-phony psychics for sure. There are definitely people in groups that can speak with departed humans, animals, places, times. These things are just as real as your fingernails. It's not my concern whether you believe in them or not. I don't care what you believe. Mostly humans use beliefs to defend themselves against insight, which is generally frightening to them because it threatens their ontologies. And the toy that I'm presenting you with is a catastrophic threat to all human ontologies because it dissolves them. Rather, it grants access to their superpositions, the places from which they were derived. So yeah, Wolfram's Rouliard, you know, anybody as intelligent as that man, and he is an actually intelligent person, this doesn't mean that he's got everything right, but his intellect is non-human, right? He is ascended. That guy's, you know, near one of the mountaintops of the possibilities of mathematical and scientific intellect, and you know, finds himself now at the horizon where, you know, his mother, I guess, was a philosopher. He thought that was a bunch of nonsense, and now he finds himself, not surprisingly, recapitulating the necessities of philosophy as a what is Wolfram? I mean, he's a kind of an engineer, but what he's engineering is fundamentally non-ordinary, even though it utilizes computation and mathematics and theorems and so forth. Yeah, he's a metamodeler, or we could call him that. The Rouliard resembles the structure and activity of the near layers, the registers of the dandelion that are closer to the physical layer. And you can listen to some talks of his in which he talks about the Rouliard and hypergraphs, and it'll blow your mind. If it doesn't blow your mind, you'll need to listen again. It won't just blow your mind, it'll blow you a new mind, which is essentially what I'm playing with here in presenting this toy and some of its entailments. So the physical layer is itself a location. Every world in time-space is a direction toward the physical layer in the dandelion. And that means all worlds in all of time, not just the ones that existed before and now, the ones that exist after, too. This whole time thing mostly doesn't exist. In this toy, like physical reality, it's a persistence of vision problem, right? Most of the time, the thing that you're afraid of, if you're afraid of death, and it's natural for a physical animal to be concerned with, preserve the body. But most of the time, you're already dead. And dead doesn't mean to be inert or gone. And just like birth, death is wildly diverse in terms of what may take place for what appears to be a distinct participant, or can be thought of as a distinct participant. Think about birth, right? We think, it's the same thing for everybody. There's no chance of that being true. The universe is undergoing eugenesis as a human being, moment to moment, not just, in the time in your mother's womb, and then the kind of different time outside it. You're enmeshed in a vast manifold of wombs. Right? As I've said before, just at the physical layer, your mother, the entirety of the organisms of Earth, their entire history and future, the surface of the Earth, the atmospheric layer, the activity of the moon and its effect on living beings, the activity of the sun, and yes, whether you believe in astrology or not, without those planets, you're not here. I'm not claiming astrology is true. I'm not making any truth claims, actually, at all. It's just obvious that if Jupiter wasn't there, you wouldn't be. Right? So, and then you have, local you have the womb that the sun creates, the bubble of its effect on interstellar space, and its effect in relation to intergalactic space, and the local relationship with the entirety of time-space, and the local relationship with the dandelion. Time-space is an expression. Of the dandelion. And again, it's being progenerated moment to moment. It's not like it got progenerated at the beginning and then it expanded. The beginning is now. The end is now. All intervals in between the beginning and the end are now. Right? The stuff is pouring in to this moment from this perspective.
I watch so much Netflix. Yeah, by the time I'm done with everything.
It's funny, I just heard a woman saying, I watched so much Netflix. But the humans can't make anything. It is impossible for them to forge a construct that isn't an analogy or a metaphor of what the dandelion is doing. Right? Physical reality is the Netflix of the gods. Except they can participate directly in the shows. They can forget that they're gods and participate directly in the shows. And I don't just mean gods in the traditional sense. I mean intelligences that are not primarily physical, and you belong to that family. You're just very confused about it. At death, the layers of this confusion may take some non-time to resolve. And interestingly, these matters are very, very difficult to frame in language because the prevailing metaphors in language, like birth, death, intervals, sequential time, separate identities and so forth. There are all these entailments of the way we use language. They're not intrinsic to language itself. They're intrinsic to the traditional modes and features that we're familiar with. But I'm not giving up. I'm just bemoaning the difficulty of finding metaphors to frame some of these features of the dandelion with. So you know, your body has organs, and among them, among the external ones anyway, one of the most profound, of course your sense organs are very profound, but your hands, right? Your hands are what you primarily use to enact your will, secondarily perhaps your voice. Right? You can give a command to another human. Oh, I've generated a controversy here accidentally. Blue Jay controversy in process. Your hands are the part of you you most often see, and they're very profound. I could launch into an entire lecture on this. And if you're interested, just search my channel and find my interview with my discussion with Tim Sanderson, in which I go through the hand toy at some length. I'll probably cover it again in a near-term video. But essentially, like your hand, you have a wrist, and that wrist leads into the dandelion, and it's producing you moment to moment. And your body actually has the same structure as your hand, right? It has one unifying body, right, your torso. Two sides, so to speak, although they're not obviously separate, right? But your front is very different from your back, just notice that. Your front is sort of presentation, and your back, well, that's a weirder problem. So your body has organs, and similarly, without each of those organs, the fact that you have a brain doesn't matter. Like, it makes no sense. Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. So thinking of your brain as a separate, distinct thing can be useful unless you believe it, in which case it's blinding. The intelligences of each of your organs are required to produce the possibilities of the features and functions of your brain, which is like a layer in the dandelion. It's a translation layer. And there are translation layers that are not the registers I've described previously. Or rather, those registers have features that are effectively translation layers. So your brain is more of a transceiver. It is not the origin of your thought or abilities. However, it has such a peculiar array of features. It's basically like a mini version of the dandelion in your skull. But all of your organs are mini versions of features of the dandelion. Do I dare? Nah, I'm going to stay with the topic. Your thoughts actually, what I want to talk about more is your dreaming. Thoughts are a much more difficult thing because there's many different modes of them. So your dreaming, one way of understanding it, I've often asked people, what do you think is the source of illumination in your dreaming experience? And even people who are very skillful dreamers are usually surprised by this. Or they offer a simple change of venue answer. They're like, oh, it's consciousness. Really? Well, what's that? Well, awareness. Right? It just goes circularly around. Nobody knows what any of these words mean. We just use them as if we did. And actually, they all mean the dandelion, but nearly nobody is playing with that. And there's also a beyond of the dandelion that generates it. And that's completely transcendental to anything you can say, except maybe that. No, it's transcendental to that too. So your dreaming is like you dying to awareness of this layer and then being reforged in awareness, in consciousness, while you're sleeping, or if you're really skillful, while you're awake. So it's like you become the dandelion and produce in consciousness adventures that resemble experiencing an entire lifespan in a vignette, right? In a short story. Now, it doesn't have to be short. People have had dreams in which they experience an entire lifetime, and people have had dreams in which they experience a sequence of lifetimes. And a guy I was listening to on a podcast recently, I don't actually know much about this guy. I've heard him a few times. I have some doubts about him, but he's a proponent of using methylene blue. And I think he used to work for the CIA or something. And by those two things, you could locate him. So he was subject to certain kinds of epileptic fits. And his discussion of them in the podcast I listened to recently, was very profound. I'll try to paraphrase it. He said it would begin with a sense of déjà vu, very profound sense of déjà vu, and then every feature of my experience, the sense of this déjà vu would continue to grow until it became obvious to me that this was being produced by someone, like a film would be. And then he said he would have, now look, I have no idea about this, the verity of this, but it's useful to imagine whether or not it's true. He would then experience the experiences of other human beings, sometimes a full lifetime of experience, and sometimes a sequence of lifetimes of experience of different people, women, men, children, cis guys, gay women, whatever, like everybody. And it was so overwhelming. Obviously he's having a kind of a fit, right? Epilepsy used to be called the sacred disease, partly probably for reasons resembling to this, though not all epileptics have the same kind of experience. And then he would say, when the fit was over, it would take me days or weeks just to integrate all of the memories and experiences from those events. Right? Well, this is what dreaming is. Right? Except usually you probably dream, though again, humans are a topology. They have every kind of thing you've never imagined going on in their minds and experience. But dreaming is kind of like this. It's like this layer of consciousness turning inside out and producing figments of itself that are meta-relational. The priorities in dreaming and the feelings in dreaming, they're nothing like, most of the time, at least for me, what my waking mind feels or expects when placed in a situation. Right? They're very different. They're all about relationship, and intensity, and not much about thingness or accounting or even counting. And if they start to become about counting, I'm going to wake up, most likely. Your mileage may vary, probably does. So, these are some of my thoughts for the moment. I'm still chewing on this, and today I'm sort of conserving my energy a bit. So I hope to continue in future recordings to explore these and related matters. And I'm profoundly grateful to have this time together to learn and grow and unforget and play and explore. I wish you every beautiful way of life, health, joy, and the capacity to fulfill the promise of your human birth to those you love and the living places as well. Thank you for joining me. Take a moment to like or comment or share my video if you wish. Tickle the algorithm, I'd appreciate it. Till next time, bye-bye for now.